Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm Deez, this is my workshop. And today I want to get on to another simple little project, but something I've been wanting to make for a long time. A few people have suggested making one, and there's been a few times where I could really have used one. And what I want to make is an angle block or an angle parallel set, and specifically 45 degrees. I've got this angle block set that I purchased just for things that, in case I wanted to mill something at an angle. And something that I'm realizing is it's not as easy as you might think to just mill an angle on your mill. Your mill is perpendicular 90 degrees, left or right, up or down. You got your three axes. You got to start messing with your head tilt if you want to start doing that kind of stuff. I don't really want to take that out of tram and mess with that. So it really comes down to how you mount your materials, your work pieces in your vise in order to get these angles that you're looking for. So I have this angle block set. Now, there is no 45 degree angle block that came with this set, but you can stack these together and make 45 degrees. Problem with that is they're thin, they're narrow, they're small. There's a gap in the vise. So you got to get creative with how you do this. So this video is going to be more about getting creative on how to mill an angle, a 45 degree angle. And no, these things are not going to be absolute precision. These are going to be roughing in, I'll call them, 45 degree angle blocks. They're going to be thicker. They're going to be like 1/2 inch aluminum. I think I'm going to make it out of aluminum because that's a material I have. And we're just going to make some 45 degree angle blocks. Very similar to these, but hopefully a little bit bigger. And they'll be thicker. I'm going to make a pair. So I'll make 2 of them. And I'm going to stack, a 20, maybe a 30 and a 15, or 20 and a 25. We'll get both of these stacked together. And hopefully we'll get our 45 degree angle. And we'll be able to mill that. So the creativity is going to become with how we mount this into the vise. I'm going to try some tactics. I'm not looking on the internet on how other people are doing it. I'm trying to use the tools that I have and logic in my brain. I know there's going to be a better way to do this, but bear with me. All of the projects that I do in this shop are about learning, and I'm excited to get on with this project. So with all that said, 45 degree angle block. I thought about drawing it out. Actually, I will draw it out, but it's going to be pretty comical because it's going to be a triangle. So let's get started with this video. Have a little fun in the shop, and I look forward to everybody following along and some of your advice at the end of this video. Thanks again, everybody. All right, let's go shopping for materials. We're going to make these 45 degree angle blocks. So come over here, take a look at what we got. I've got a lot of aluminum still. I don't know why these wouldn't be good made out of aluminum. Sure, you could drop, dent, and ding them. I do have some T-bars and some square stock. I've got a video I went through that not too long ago, but I've got this piece. Let's see if I can grab it here. Snuck under here. That might be a good candidate. There we go. So we got this bar of 1/2 inch thick. I'm pretty sure that's 1/2 inch aluminum. So that's a candidate. It wouldn't end up, the only thing is it's not going to end up being a very big V block because of this width, right? It's 45 degree angle. So it's only going to be about that big, which is actually going to be smaller or about the same size of the ones that I have. Why is that important? If we come over here, well, you can see it here. So this gap here, when something's up here, those V blocks will fall. What I'm looking for is a V block that will cross these parallels here, sit on both sides, so that it can, I can set it here and mount my workpiece in there in the lathe. Right now, I got to put a flat under here, and then I can do that. But I really would like to be able to cross this. If I can't and I use the aluminum, that's fine. The other option, since we're over here, I thought about using the steel plate. This is thicker than 1/2 inch, I think, but it is an option. That would give me a pretty big you know, I just cut this as square as I can, and I just make 2 giant V blocks there. But then I worry, is that going to be too big? So these are our 2 candidates. We'll take these over to the workbench, start drawing some things up, and see what we're working with. But that's going to be the material, either this or that. I'm not going to use plastic or brass. Plastic would be good for, well, now that I say that, I do have a lot of flat plastic. That could work too for a parallel. You're just lining things up. It doesn't have to be rigid steel necessarily. What do we got here? This is where I put that stuff. Interesting. Got a lot of this thick nylon plate. That's too thin. All right. Well, I'm glad I mentioned that. Let's take this too. This is an option as well. Let's take this also to the workbench, and we will. Those are our 3 potential work pieces. This might be a good one. Plastic's easy to work with. It's a good practice material, and in the end, it'd be a functional parallel if it works out. Well, we went shopping. We've got a few options for materials to make this 45-degree angle blocks out of. I was kidding when I said I was going to draw it out. There's not much to draw out. It's going to be a 45-degree angle. I think I'm going to make 2 of them. I already said that. Here's our choices of material. We got a steel plate, A36 steel, mild steel. I don't think I'm going to use this right now. Someday I might, if this turns out well. But I like this little piece of steel. This is the thickest flat stock that I have. Might need that for something else. This would make a good angle block or angle parallel angle block. I don't think I'm going to use this right now, so we'll set that aside. We've got this aluminum bar stock, which I think would be a great option. The only thing is this would dent and ding, but you know, anything would. Steel would be more durable, but the only problem with this is it's only 2 inches, I think. It's 2 inches wide, so it's going to end up being a 2-inch parallel. That's smaller than these anyway. These are 3-inch parallels that I have, or 3-inch angle blocks that came with that set. So I'm going to skip this, and for today's project, we are going to use this. This is a 1/2-inch piece of, I don't know if it's Delrin or plastic or nylon. It's one of those plastics. It's pretty hard. Doesn't flex a whole lot. I think this is going to be a good candidate for this parallel. I'm going to start big on this thing. I'm going to make 2 of them, and then later on I have some options. I could, you know, cut one of them in half and actually end up with 3, 2 smaller ones and 1 larger one, and we'll kind of show you that. But what I'm going to do is cut an angle. I'm going to cut a square the same basically width as this piece, and it'll just be a square out of this. Now fortunately this is pretty square with this rough cut edge. I was messing with that earlier. Other than that burr down there, if you get that off of there, it doesn't rock. This is pretty square. This corner is really good. This one's not as good. There's a burr on the edge though. I think if I take that burr off, let's take that off. I think it's also not too bad. Looks like, yeah, it's still a little bit of a rock. So this one's not as square, but this corner here is pretty square. So I have a good foundation, I think, to start with anyway. And so I think what we're going to do is just mark an angle here and cut this down and just have a square piece here. Then we'll cut it, and then we'll start milling the pieces as close as we can get to a 45-degree angle for each. Well, we've got our blank cut out. This is going to go back in my pile for a future project. Let's go ahead and clean that off because we can. And then we got a new piece. Clean that off. So I'm thinking about the next operation. I think I'm going to try my best to square this up a little better than it is. I have a little bit of a nub down here that needs to be milled off. And my cut is not going to be great from the bandsaw, but I do still have one good edge somewhere here. And the reason that I want to do that is I think if I can, it'll be easier to square this up as a whole versus two triangular pieces. Let's go over to the mill and see what we can come up with. All right, we're going to try something here. I don't know how well this is going to work, but I saw this trick on one of Joe Pye's videos, and I apologize, Joe Pye, if I get this completely wrong. But what we're going to do is mount this piece in our mill vise. I'm not sure if I'll have enough travel on my axis to do all this. So might actually be better if I had the jaw mounted back here, but still going to try this. I don't think that's going to be big enough. All right. This is going to be the plan. I don't have enough y-axis travel, but that's okay. I have my x-axis. I have this mounted in here. What we're going to do is face off, mill off both of these two sides. We're going to then turn it 90 degrees and do these other remaining sides. And hopefully we'll have a pretty square piece to work with. Then we can flip it over and I can finish the other part of the outside of the pieces, because there's really no way for me to clamp this. I think I could maybe get creative with some other, face clamping and maybe a fixture plate, but for now, this is what I'm going to do, and then we'll flip it over and we'll mount it again, and we'll try to finish it off and get everything as accurate as we can. So let's get started. Change of plans, because I can't mill this side. I can only mill that side about halfway here. I'm going to use the DRO, and I'm going to clean this up one more time, and that way when I flip it over, I'll have the same depth, and we'll always use the DRO to get where I need to be. trying to get a little creative here, and I think this will work, but this is also an exercise in me learning some techniques. So I have 3 sides that are milled parallel to each other, and I'm going to take this out, and these are the 3 edges that I'm going to work with in order to try to square this thing up. I think it'll work, but that's the current plan. So let's get this thing out of here, reposition it. I'm actually going to deburr it too. You can see that edge there. Just a little bit of burr. That was the back edge. And then this side here. It's actually not too bad. So there's our, these should be square. That is square. And that is square. Okay. So now the idea is clean these chips up. So we're going to bring this out. We'll square this edge off, and now this edge and this edge, in theory, should be parallel. But now that we have these 2 sides, we can go ahead and start working and getting towards actual parallelism with everything. I think this is going to work. All right, guys. I have to scrap that whole idea and think differently here. I'm not thinking smartly. I'm thinking like a newbie. I thought, okay, well, I'll just mount this in here and we can go around it and it'll be simple and easy. Well, I don't have that kind of travel on my y-axis, and I can't see behind it with my x-axis to really make this right. I can use the DRO, but then when I flip these around, it's just not working out. You can see I've got all these different levels and edges. We are going to rethink this. Now, we have got at least multiple parallel sides completely cut because of the way I did have it mounted. So I think it's time now that we do this a little differently, think a little bit smarter, and get this project done, or moving in the right direction. So I want to take any burrs off of this bottom edge. Yeah. Burrs off of here. And we're just going to do this differently. Again, this is all a learning process for me. I think my new direction's going to work out. This is essentially what we're going to do. We're going to mount this like this. I could put it on there I'm going to use a parallel because I have got a flat edge again with this ridge, so I need to have a completely flat edge before I can actually use the mill vices flat for a little more stability. So we're going to go with this. I think it's going to work. First thing we're going to do is fix this boogered up part that I did. So this is where it's going to be. Let's get our rapid handle. Need to adjust that. This is my smallest parallel that I have. Let's make sure that's nice and tight. And we're going to put a different end mill in here, and we're going to start over. So let me get the end mill changed out, and let's do this differently. I think this is going to work out better. Finally, we've got something that's going to work for us. Let's finish this part of it up. Everything's about learning. Just got to keep working at it until you find a process that works. Tell you what, every time I do a project, I learn something. I was fuddling around with this thing, trying to mount it flat in the vise, and thought I could go around. I just don't have the travel in my X or my Y axis in order to face off these sides that are exposed over the side of the mill vise. Now, I know you can get creative and mount things like on a fixture plate to where they're proud or they're raised above. Maybe put something in the center underneath here so that you can go all the way around it, or at least on the back side. My problem was, because I was using the vise to clamp it down, I would always end up with a ridge. So I'd have a ridge, I'd flip it around, then I'd have another ridge, it'd be on the opposite side. It just wasn't going the way I wanted it to. So I had to take a break. I stopped, took a break, got a drink, and I thought, okay, let me regroup here. There's got to be a way to do this that's not nearly as frustrating. And so in the end, I mounted it I knew I had a couple vertical, completely flat sides from milling out those across the back side of that. I could at least get a lip on those, flip it around. I did the other side. I thought, okay, well, that'll work. I can use those as my reference points. I'll use a single parallel, and then I mounted it in the vise vertically. That went so much faster. This is really smooth. This worked out exactly like I wanted it to. So now I have a square piece to start with. That took longer than I thought, but again, this is about learning for me, and I learned quite a bit by just screwing around with this piece. Let's check for square. There's no rock there. There's no rock there. There's no rock there. And there's no rock there. That worked out really well. So sometimes you just need to take a step back, think about what you're doing, and regroup. And now I've got perfectly, well, for my purpose, I wouldn't say this is perfectly, but it's pretty dang close, square corners that I can actually work with when I start using a fixture plate in order to mill this 45-degree angle. All right, so now we have our blank to work with. We're gonna start this initial cut with the bandsaw, I believe, and I'll mount each of these up and we'll clamp them down, and then we'll face that off. But before I do that, I'm gonna sit back and think a little bit. It's Sunday football. I can watch a little bit of football, but before I go and cut this in half, I want to think about all my other options on how I can actually mill that more effectively. You know, do you mount it and mill it somehow this way and then it's milled, but then I have this piece sticking out? I don't think that's a good idea. I think I need to cut this with a bandsaw, flip it, either put them together and mill them together so they're a pair, matched pair, or do them individually. So what I was saying earlier is, once I have these two halves cut out, I could actually, if these are just too big, I could cut this one down and actually end up with two smaller, thick half-inch parallels. There we go. We finally got that squared up. I just had to rethink what I was doing. That turned out really well. It's time to move on and make these things. Well, we've got our pieces ready to mill. We need to mill this face on each of these to 45 degrees. Now, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get these both clamped in here. I'm going to try so that they're both together. It'd be nice to have a match set, but I'm not sure I'm going to be able to hold it that way, but we will give it a shot. The problem is my existing 45 angle blocks. I might be able to set it up in such a way where I can repeat it, and we'll try that too. What we're going to do is use the fixture plate that I obtained, purchased from Joe Pye. I think that'll be a fun use for this. And first thing we want to do is clamp that down. Just kind of get that in here. So now we need to mount this in here somehow, like this. That's the idea. Well, here's the setup, everybody. Here's the two pieces we have. Looks a little sketchy, but I'm gonna go with it. I've got these two edges squared off. I showed you that earlier, and we just need to mill this. Now, once I set my x-axis, I'm gonna lock it in so that all the pieces are the same, and I'm hoping they turn out identical because we're not gonna move any of the other x-axis or anything, just a y back and forth. I will have to reposition this. This is a little sketchy. There isn't enough clamps really holding this piece, but since this is a plastic, soft material enough to cut, I'm gonna go with it. Normally, if I try this again, I'd either need a larger fixture plate, mount this differently. I'd like to have two clamps on here. Maybe I could use the actual table itself someday, you know, come up with something different. But there's support under here. It's gonna be fine, I think. We've got this 45-degree angle. I used one of the button stops so that I could have a positive stop repeatability for each piece because I'm gonna have to do this 4 times. This operation will probably stop in here. I'll have to flip it over, finish it off, and then repeat with this one. So with all that said, let's get to it. Let's hope this janky setup works, and hopefully we end up with some nice parallels. I might even cut a flat in these someday on the very tip on one of the sides, just like these have, but for now I'm just going for uniformity between the two pieces. So there was our first cut. That's nice. Now, the real key here is repeatability. That's what this setup is supposed to be about. Can I repeat that cut? We're going to find out. That'll slide in there. Get it nice. Try to get as much clamped on there as I can. Make it nice and square. There we go. Now, if it's done right, hopefully this will just cut and be the same. I'm not moving anything else. Let's find out. Still got about 1 thou or so to come off of there. This isn't the most ideal setup. I think I'll try a spring pass. Let's see what that does for us. Should have locked that. I made a mistake. I didn't lock my x-axis, but I do have it locked now. I think it moved about 1 thou when I changed all this around. This piece is good. Let's get this one out of here and let's clamp down the other one and do the same thing, and then we'll come over to the bench and examine them. Well, we got it. Pretty good. These are just a little big for this setup. I think if I did them again, or if I wanted to improve that, I think what I could do is maybe figure out a way to mount it like this. And I may do that someday. Actually, I would mount it this way so I can see what I'm doing. And I still might do that sometime, but for now, I think we're done. And we can always improve these later, but let's take this over to the bench and get a closer look. Well, let's get you in here for a closer look. I think these turned out pretty good. They're not perfect. I think I've got some tram issues on my mill. I'll revisit that again sometime. We do have some burrs here. Let's deburr this. Now, the surface finish of these is just the raw stock that we had. But overall, I got these, for making them independently, they really are close. Now, I wouldn't say they're a matched pair, and they certainly aren't ultra super precision. But they are pretty good. For the projects I'm working on, there's a little bit of a variance there. It's kind of hard to see, but I did get a pretty good 45. Once I figured out how to mount my workpiece in the vise, and I was able to continue on and get these two pieces squared up. So these turned out pretty good. The finish ends up being really good on those. And then finally I had to figure out a creative way to mount that. Now, I think if I did it again, and I still might actually do it with this, if I could mount it like this, then I would be able to just come across in one operation and not have this blemish here. But that is pretty smooth. I had to do the same with this one as well. You can see. And based off of the milling marks. You can see I must have probably a slight tram issue with the head. It probably has a bit of a tilt. So I'll revisit that someday. It's really close for this kind of a part, but that's about as a 45-degree angle as I'm gonna need to mount up different work pieces. And then, like I said, if I wanted to, I could even cut one of these in half, do the same thing, and then have a couple smaller parallels. Turned out pretty good. Maybe we'll chuck something up in the vise here before we close this video, and we'll give these a test and try to cut a 45-degree angle in a hunk of steel or something. Let's go do that. Clean up this mess. I do like this fixture plate. Worked out. I'm going to try to come up with some projects to use that more and more. But I think that worked out pretty well. Let's get this out of here. And I don't know how much of you caught what I was doing there. I didn't really talk a whole lot, but you know, I used a button stop that I made previously. That worked out really nicely. I used a couple of the hold down clamps to hold my parallels in place. And then I used a couple different parallels, my angle blocks in place. I used a couple different parallels in order to create a backstop for my workpiece. Finally got to use those. That worked out really well. It's a nice little fixture plate. Perfect for the hobby shop. Let's get that out of here. Oh, I need to put this back. Had to get creative here and remove this piece. And finally, let's take the fixture plate out. To get something mounted in here, these are plenty big. I may cut these down, but that's the idea, is have a pair of these where we can put some sort of material. What do we have? Let me find something. So I would never set something up like this in reality. It's really more of a gauge, a way to get things set up, and I'll probably cut one of these in half. This is rather large for these kinds of setups, but I do want a large one for who knows what kind of layouts I might need to make. But in theory, you know, if I need to, I want to be able to mount certain materials in the mill vise at a 45-degree angle so I can come across and create a 90. So we're going to test this real quick on this piece of nylon. I'm just going to bring the quill down and we'll cut across, and then we'll close this video out. I'm going to improve these later on. I'm going to make some changes to them, but for the most part, these are done. And really, this was an exercise in setups and things like that. So let's just cut that real quick, and then we'll get over to the workbench. I don't have any shorter stock, and probably should have just cut it, but this is what we're going to do. So this is kind of a bonehead setup, but you get the idea. Well, everybody, I hope you enjoyed. This is going to be the close of the angle block. 45 degree, ½ inch thick, large, 4.5 inch long angle blocks that I made. And this wasn't so much an exercise in making angle blocks, although these will be useful tools. It was more about mounting and setting up your workpiece. What's the optimal way to achieve some of the cuts that you're doing? I got a lot to learn. I learn with every project. I think when I first started, I was on the wrong track trying to get these trying to get the 90 degree angles completed the way they should be, and then I figured out a better way to hold the material and get that knocked out. And then the setup, I think in theory was not bad for my cutting the face of the 45 degree angle. I think I would do it differently next time, and there will be a next time, because I'm actually going to cut one of these in half and have a match set that's smaller for the same types of setups. Right now, it's almost impractical how big it is, but I want one that is this large. I know someday there's going to be some project where I would really appreciate having a large ½ inch thick 45 degree angle block. So I'm going to leave one intact, but the other I'm going to cut in half and then face off the sides of that. That'll be in probably a mess in the shop type video, because it'll be a small project. But I'm going to hold the materials differently. I'm still going to use Joe Pye's fixture plate, which this thing is great for a small workshop, a small lathe. It came in very handy. You're able to hold all kinds of different materials flat and do different operations. But I got some ideas on how I want to use this more efficiently, and we'll cut that down. I'm going to mount it this way so that I can come across the face of this with the end mill in one single operation, rather than the need to flip it over on the y-axis. The x-axis, I've got all that travel. So I need to get more creative when I'm working with my work pieces. But they turned out very well. And then we did a test cut with a ridiculous setup that I would never do in real life. It was just a test, and we were able to put a V-notch. That was really what I was going for. There's been some of the project I worked on recently, I just wanted to put a 90 degree V, like V-blocks and things like that, in a material. But trying to get everything mounted and set at an angle sometimes can be challenging. It's a little more difficult than you might think. So I was able to use this as a guide. I mounted that up there, and we cut a 90 degree angle in this piece of nylon. It's actually quite accurate. I mean, you've got an end mill that's 90 degree cut. That's one of the benefits of being able to set your materials up properly. So anyway, I think I'm gonna close out this video, clean up this mess, and I hope you enjoyed. Definitely could make some improvements, and I will. I might cut a flat on the ends of these, kind of like how these have. I think that's so different ways you can mount your blocks. It would give you another alternative to putting it in the mill vise, things like that. So we'll probably do something like that. But for now, it's a fun little project. Really all about work holding and working with your materials and figuring out creative ways to make your cuts. I hope you enjoyed. I hope to see you on the next one. Thanks for watching. If you haven't subscribed, please do. Thanks for watching, everybody.